We ready to go again? Here we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Best Concordia. This is episode 3 of our podcast. You're in the right constellation. And I'm Johnny B, and you're in the right spot because you're listening to us. And I am here joined in the ethnography lab by my fabulous producers, Anne-Marie Turcotte and Kris Millett. Hey, guys. And today we've got a fabulous episode. First up, I spoke with PhD student Kris Murray in the Social and Cultural Analysis program here at Concordia. Now, one of the cool things about putting this podcast together has been, of course, doing these interviews, which have been super fun to do and really interesting. And then when the three of us listen back to them when we're putting together the episode, we start hearing these themes emerge and we begin connecting the dots between people's stories, because it's not always apparent at first when we're listening to it just what it is that we've got here. And then, bam, we realize the interviews are orbiting in one beautiful, sparkling, twinkling galaxy.
You know, when you're talking to somebody and they'll bring up a topic, whatever. It's like, yeah, we're kind of talking about the same thing, but like we're in the same area. If you're in the same area, you're, within, face distance, or you're within like a town type thing. But when you're saying like constellation, I think it's nice. A, it kind of says it's a bigger field, and B, it allows you to fit into that bigger field nicely. Yeah, I think we all like to think of stars, the birthing places of all life in the universe type thing,
Right.
But no, just when Craig said it a while ago, it was like, you're in the right constellation, and I was like, that's nice, Craig, thanks. I like that.
Is that shady, or are you complimenting me?
Exactly.
You're like, I can go either way.
You're in the right nebula of space, which covers a vast distance, but it works.
And on today's episode, we are looking at two things: the development and trajectory of ethnographic projects that are fundamentally linked to place and space, and the use of visual methods, and in this case, specifically, the humble photograph. Now, Kris has done extensive work around graffiti art, and his PhD project is looking at contemporary muralism as a public art and lifestyles of risk and infamy, particularly around graffiti writers here in Montreal. So I started out asking Kris about the Montreal context and what it is that makes this city unique in terms of its graffiti. Just briefly, tell me about the Montreal context, like how it makes it different. Like, how's it different from Brooklyn, or how's it different from Chicago?
It's a little Brooklyn and Chicago. I haven't been to Chicago. Definitely been to Brooklyn, and there's that age-old thing between Montreal and New York. Yeah. Right. The Big Apple and Montreal, and which city has the best this, and blah blah blah. There's always that comparison. Okay. Cities do that all the time. But Montreal and New York have a special relationship, right? Look at megabus tourism. A lot of people go in between a lot, which also relates to the development of graffiti in the city as well, right? Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people were going back and forth from New York and Montreal. Right. Like some old school writers I've spoken to said that they were influenced heavily from their travels in between New York and Montreal in terms of doing that kind of work. And, of course, the diffusion of graffiti throughout the states from Philadelphia, New York, and, L.A. and other cities eventually made its way into Montreal. But Montreal also got, pollinated from Europe, right? Like France and Germany and the UK, whatever. And people, mostly say France and Germany more, a lot of France, came on through. And like an old writer like Psych and stuff like that from Europe, whatever, really blew up the streets back in, I think it was like the 90s, when nobody knew what was going, like people were doing stuff, but this guy Psych comes up from out of town and just like shreds the city, and it changed the game a little bit, Wow. A lot of old school writers would point to that, but Montreal as a city, though, is distinct in its architecture, like all cities.
Right.
And that really determines, I think, where, graffiti is easily going to be done, maybe, or where people can get access to. So we have a lot of back alleys. Believe it or not, not a lot of cities have alleys like this.
That's true.
Go to New York, there's no alleys.
Yeah.
None. Yeah. There's literally, there's alley street. It's a small street that looks like an alley. I remember when I was there walking around, I'm like, wow, there's no alleys, and I stopped. I remember like, oh, this looks like an alley.
Except for this
alley street. I'm like, oh, that makes sense, whatever, Yeah. But there's hardly any alleys like that in New York, let's say Manhattan, whatever, particularly Manhattan. Then like there is here in Montreal. We have fire escapes on the back, so you can get up, and ladders and stuff like that historically, as opposed to, say, somewhere in New York where all the fire escapes are in the front. So that changes the game immensely in terms of the way that a writer is going to be able to get up the stake. Ever try to be on a main street even at night?
Yeah.
I've been there as an ethnographer and thinking, all right, I got to climb that ladder, and you got to watch people. You got to like stake out the spot. It takes a while. It's not like just walking into a back alley and like doing a couple of quick looks, check for cameras, and then pop the stairs down and go, or ladder or something like that, or jump up or climb up through a pipe or whatever you need to do, whatever. But like, you can get the rooftops. There's a lot of alleyways. The industrial sector of each city too, right? The turnover, old abandoned buildings, which become sites where people, writers and artists and people, just people in general, not even graffiti writers, but homeless people will go to make it their own, to reappropriate the spot. A lot of tracks too. The way we have freight in Montreal or just in Quebec or Canada.
Right.
It's different than, say, trains in Europe. There's a lot of passenger trains, which is a huge thing in terms of graffiti. Bombing trains.
Right.
The word bombing means to do graffiti.
Right.
All right? Okay, sorry. It doesn't mean to blow up a train.
No.
Even if you burn the train, it means you've done a really nice piece. But anyways, they'll hit trains up a lot. Passenger trains.
Right.
We do a lot of freight. And at one point, passenger trains were pretty big here for a minute, too, in this city as well. A good documentary called In and Out by some locals who did that, and has a huge connect in terms of subway graffiti, very dangerous, and train graffiti outside and stuff like that. But it's really the architecture, the transportation systems, the infrastructure, a lot of infrastructure that gets hit by graffiti as well. Underneath the Ville Marie, you used to, the TA wall right next, just down the street, from Green type thing, for years, for 20-ish or more years, was like a spot, like semi-safe spot that you can go paint. It had a huge upper wall and a lower wall, which was the original. It went back to the 90s. And people have been painting there for a long, long time, and that spot was they had protection was afforded to them at that spot a little bit because of the massive Ville Marie, the warehouse industrial area in St. Henry. They kind of hid that little spot off.
Physically, there was protection for them.
Right, visually. Gotcha. And now that that's gone, the city's changing, and you're gonna see things are changing in the city too. Like a lot of other older industrial places are starting to get hit up or whatever.
Right.
So that kind of industrial turnover, the architecture, the infrastructure, the alleyways, the streets, the type of architecture in a city, I think, by and far determines to a degree the frequency, the type, amount, whatever, and look at the policing in New York. New York used to be totally like the Manhattan, whatever, the streets used to be destroyed. And then, Cog and Giuliani and all them, whatever, right. And they went on their massive crusade and they got rid of all the cars. Mm-hmm. They took the cars away from them, so they started hitting walls. And then the policing and vandal squads and all that kind of stuff kind of pushed out all the not all of it, but a good amount of the wall painting, say, in New York proper. But you go there, and what are they doing? They got stickers. They're doing like quick tags. There's a lot more tags and stickers and like scratches here and there, whatever. Yeah. But the sticker game in New York is insane. Huh. Like last time I was a few years ago when I was there last, but it's insane. Yeah. Because stickers are quick. You could be on the streets and like slap, slap, slap. You can get up really quick, right?
What?
So
That's
things
crazy.
change, right? Sticker game in Montreal's gone up for sure over the years.
Yeah.
Whatever, but our streets are our streets. Whatever, we got a special little thing going on.
Right.
But yeah, so I think that depends. So Montreal has a particular character, and also Montreal, like I said earlier, it's pollination from Europe and the States, which is a unique pollination that a lot of other cities didn't have. Yeah. Going back 15, 20 years ago, Montreal itself already is that kind of cultural place. You know what I mean? Like we have a lot of people. I mean, a lot of cities have a lot of people who come from a lot of different places. Yes, for sure. But compared to some place that's, say, like, I don't know, I'll say Chicago, and I might be completely off here, but, Chicago has a lot of people from the States painting in Chicago, let's say. Mm-hmm. But not a lot of people from, France or Germany.
Right.
Or Japan, I don't know, whatever, you know what I mean? I'm not saying there's a lot of people in Japan painting here, but I'm just saying, like people have come from Japan to paint, you know what I mean, here at festivals and stuff like that. We have, like, an interesting spot geographically, right, in terms of our position for travel and stuff like that too. People come to Montreal for the culture, and there's a lot of people who come far and wide from other parts of the world just to paint in the city. Yeah. Just to paint in Montreal.
Cool.
It's a travel destination.
Kris also spoke to me about how he got into researching graffiti as an undergrad and about using photography as a research tool, incorporating traditional photography as a means of documenting a subculture, but also using what he calls the shoebox interview method.
I mean, I was already I've been looking at particularly graffiti when I first started. It was just graffiti and anything on the street.
Yeah, how did you get into that? Were you like...
It's 2003, so it was like 14 years, almost 15 years ago now.
Okay.
It was in my undergrad when I was here. Yeah. And what was it? I was 2003, so I was already in my third year, just going into full-time studies at that point, because I was doing part-time for a couple of years, realizing that it would take me 90 years to get, or 60 years to get the 120 credits or 90, whatever it was that I needed from undergrad.
Right.
And I took my first, qualitative methods course in sociology, or whatever it was. And, the prof challenges you, it says after you've done the class, whatever it is, now go home tonight and, think of something that, look around you and pay attention to the world type thing. When you get home, try to think of something relevant that you want to research about, that you think you can interview a couple of people about and learn about, At the time, I was living down the street from Concordia here, down Gagne at the old Griffintown.
Okay.
Before it got, actually it's only been before it got, whatever. It's a really old section of Montreal, so it's been gone through a lot. But, this is like, around 15 years ago, before all the hard gentrification kicked in. They were starting to plan at that point, super cheap rent, small place, next to a Kalash, whatever. Mm-hmm. But by the time I got home, I realized, I'd noticed more graffiti and tags and stuff, or just graffiti, on the walls. And then I got home over the building I was living on in William and Murray. It was like this draped. It was covered in graffiti. And I was like, I didn't really pay attention to that,
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just pay attention to it now, and interviewed a couple of people, of which turned out to be...
did you have friends who were doing graffiti and stuff?
I got lucky. One person in the class worked as a volunteer for Under Pressure, which is the... international graffiti or hip-hop, not graffiti, hip-hop, more hip-hop, involving everything in terms of, including graffiti. But hip-hop festival that happens here in Montreal, it's on 21 years. Okay. At that time, whatever it was on its 6th, 7th year. And the guy was like, hey, man, he just kind of threw it at me. He's like, I volunteer. I have an in with one of the organizers, his name is C's. He can hook you up, I was like, all right, cool, I'll talk to him. Sure, it turned out to be that this guy was the founder, one of the co-founders of Under Pressure, one of the co-founders of the TA Wall, and, old prominent member of an old prominent group of writers called Team Autobot, TA in the city. And I interviewed him, and he kind of keyed me into a whole bunch of spots and areas I never knew, one of which was the TA Wall. Just, it's not there. Well, it's kind of there now. It's kind of gone now, but... It's right under the Ville Marie, next to the old Selby campus and the old Imperial Tobacco building area underneath the Ville Marie there. Used to be an old factory there and whatever it was that got tore down the last couple of years. And now that they're rebuilding the Ville Marie, whatever. But I remember that was 2003 November. That's, some of my first photos were kind of, with a little digital Olympus, those crappy little digitals they had that are the size of our phones now.
Yeah.
Right? Much larger, but whatever, and terrible pixelization compared to whatever our phones could do now. But and I walked around hunting this graph in that area, and it was the TA Wall was, and the streets in and around Concordia and Griffintown, Old Port, were some of the first places I started taking pictures and documenting graffiti, and interviews snowballed into other interviews. And after my undergraduate, which I used it as my muse for all my undergraduate writings. Right. Any kind of theory I'd read about, I'd throw it at graffiti and street art and stuff like that, and try to kind of test it, as an object, and it seemed to work well with a lot of stuff I was kind of thinking at that time. And jumped into a master's in sociology in 2006 here as well, and made graffiti, the subculture in Montreal, my focus for the master's.
And did you use photography in that too?
Extensively.
So photography's been an ongoing
extensively
medium
since 03.
For you. Hey?
Yeah. Extensively.
Cool.
What was it? I'm all over the place here, whatever. But recently, there's a local cat. His name is Patrick O'Connor, and he's got a history in the subculture going back into the 90s, back when early 90s when things were just kind of brewing up in Montreal, in terms of the subculture of graffiti, of writers and stuff like that. Anyway, so Patrick is an old documenter, and he's got a lot of photos from the 90s, mid-90s, all the way to about 2003. And then he started doing more film. Okay. He did a little bit of photography still since then, but he does more film now. But I've been sitting with him for the last couple months doing photo elicitation interviews in a certain way, which I'll get to in a second. Where we sit back and he pulls out, because all his photos, all my stuff is digital, but all his stuff is analog hard copy, right? It's film, yeah. So he needed a way to digitize that. So I went and bought a scanner, like a cheap enough scanner, and I bring it over to his place, his mom's place. Actually, we go to his mom's place, we chill out, and we're scanning all of his photos and stuff, and digitizing them. So as we're digitizing them out of these packets from the 90s, we'll be looking at them. I'll throw the recorder on, and the photo. So this is photo elicitation. It's a fantastic research method. So you have photos that your participant brings, or you bring, whatever,
right?
And then you look over the photos. Right, and so ideally, if your participant has old photos, like Patrick's doing, as he's going through them, it elicits memories. And so these memories, then we talk about.
Oh, wow!
And it's an amazing device because it's so often that you'd be talking about something in an interview, and then at one point in your interview, someone will say, "Oh yeah, I totally forgot about this," and because you elicit a memory,
right?
But there's other stuff that happens too that you never get to. That maybe even only years later, say someone's reading something like, oh, yeah, there's something I missed about that, or whatever, or you have to follow back up with them a couple of times to get that info to dig deeper. But photo elicitation draws it out immediately.
Wow.
And it's an amazing device. And,
So has that just been recently that you've been doing that?
Photo elicitation? No, I did photo elicitation. Actually, I was doing photo elicitation before I knew I was doing photo elicitation.
Oh, no.
I was doing it as a method back in 06, so 2006 when I started my master's. And I started getting contacts with tons of graffiti writers and artists and stuff like that in the city. And a part of that was also my field work, being present and volunteering at festivals like Under Pressure or Meeting of Styles, grabbing my camera and spending long hours every week out walking the streets and bumping into writers or taking photos. I started a blog and started to post stuff, which started to provide them a little bit of connect to my work, what I do, but also in an image-dependent, image-heavy subculture like graffiti is and street art. They love to have photos up, and so it provides you some clout,
right, because you're promoting. And you're
promoting, you're just putting up pictures. They just love to see their stuff.
Okay.
They love to have their stuff appreciated out there. They love to have more visuals of their stuff online, and particularly in 2006, in the ever-growing social media world that it was, right? What do you call, I got lost here for a second. Where am I? Bring me back. Oh, yeah, use of photos and photo elicitation. So another quick thing back to photo elicitation, too, is that the important thing in the method is that by them showing you photos, right, it switches the relationship between ethnographer and participant, where you, let's say like you're my participant, or where your participant becomes the expert, and you become the student, right? And it puts them in a different position, and it changes the power dynamic of your interview, and you can get better stuff out of them. Right? They'll tell you, like, they're more comfortable to talk about certain things, maybe, or whatever, but it repositions that power dynamic between interviewer, interviewee, and it also allows you to access information that wouldn't necessarily be readily accessible had you just done a verbal interview. Different types of recalling, right? Like you recall things. That's what it is. It's visual recall cues. That's what and it's awesome. I got this old idea about doing shoebox interviews, right? That's a great way. So I hook up with old school writers, particularly anybody who is old school writer, like anybody who beyond, let's say, 2000 something, like 2003-ish or mid-2000 when
when you say old school writer, you mean graffiti writer, right? I'm just like trying to wrap my head around the language
old school writer.
Using. Gotcha. I'm like, not like Hemingway.
No, there's an important distinction here. When I say writer, I mean graffiti writer, and a graffiti writer is an individual who writes on the streets. Writes a name or writes something on wall, whatever. Typically their name, like signature graffiti, Louis Gautier's word, from '98. That's typically what graffiti writer is. Graffiti artists, and people have, even writers, even like graffiti people who paint on the streets who call themselves graffiti artists, they have different ideas about this. It's nothing that's encased in stone. But the way I see it is that there's writing on the street, which is all that illegal stuff. Graffiti is illegal inherently. That's what makes it graffiti. It's illegal, right? Graffiti art, if somebody is considered to be a graffiti artist, that's probably, in my argument, is because they're a piecer. They do masterpieces, right? Or pieces, which is essentially, you have a tag, right, which is like your calligraphic, stylistic signature. No different than anybody else has a signature or whatever. It's just a chosen name that you write on everything, wherever you can, right? And then the piece, there's a lot of stuff in between, but the masterpiece is the ultimate culmination of style and form, lettering and calligraphy that you're capable of doing in an artistic way. It's not just one marker. It's layered. It's 3D. Right. It has arrows and bubbles and clouds. It has multiple colors and fades and shades. It has tons of stuff in there. There's a lot of stuff going on and multi-layered. And it takes a while to do. A tag you can cop out or get done rather in like 2 seconds. Mm-hmm. Done, move. You know what I mean? If you're that quick.
Right.
Most are. But piecing could take you anywhere between 3 hours to an afternoon. And to me, it's within the realm of graffiti, but to me, that's what graffiti art is. The ultimate culmination of what a writer's going to be capable of doing is that piece.
Yeah.
And, where you burn the wall with that piece, and that's like the ultimate, And then beyond that is like, graffiti productions, which are multiple writers with characters on a wall, like you'll see on the side of a restaurant or something, or on the side of a highway maybe, like where they jam it out. And then beyond that is like large-scale massive wall painting and muralism and stuff like that, right? So that's what I mean by writer. So there's writer and artist, right? To me, there's a big difference. Not all writers are graffiti artists.
Right.
Although you can argue that the calligraphic handwriting is an art.
Yeah.
It is an art. I got the worst signature in the world. It's piss poor. It's never the same.
It's not very
and the banks hate it. Because I sign something, they look at you and they're like, okay, we know you're Kris Murray, but that's like the worst signature ever. Nobody looks at my signature. And like, this is another thing too, in terms of signature society, Somebody would be like, when you sign something and you got a great signature, what's the person next to you say? Oh, that's a nice signature.
That's true.
They say that. Yeah. We say it all the time. Like, wow, that's a nice signature. You're like, thanks, man. I've been practicing. You know what I mean? But it's like, but that's okay, right? But like, writers do it all the time. It's the fact that they obviously write it illicitly on buildings. But if you see like a writer doing the signature, I'm sure too you'll be like, oh, that's a nice signature. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's interesting how much the signature is the basis for so much in our society. In your wallet, you have 5 signatures at least, right?
Yeah.
Right? And each of those signatures binds you legally to the state in certain different ways, right? Medicare, SIN, driver's license, right? Credit card, whatever, corporate too. Mm-hmm. Signatures are binding.
Yeah.
Right? What do we do? The most important things we do in our life in terms of this wonderful capitalist economy, bureaucratic, whatever it is our signature. When you get married, you sign a legal document that binds you together and to the state, right? When you divorce, same thing. The state releases you.
Yeah. When you're born. Fingerprints, whatever. But like footprints,
signatures. When you buy a house, when you make any kind of deal at the bank, when and it's funny all the way back, great deals are made with a firm handshake, right? That kind of thing. But all deals nowadays are binded, or you're bound to each other and to some kind of agreement through your signature.
Yeah.
And it's a huge basis. I mean, we develop our signatures. It's our name.
Yeah.
It's important to us,
Yeah.
We, anyways.
Absolutely.
But out of that comes, partly out of that comes like this entire subculture based on writing your name illicitly on walls,
Right.
So I've always found that kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's super cool. So wait, we'll go back to these box interview.
Oh, shoebox interviews.
Interviews.
Yeah. So the idea, going back to photo elicitation here. Yeah, you got to keep me on track.
It's okay, I got you.
So old school writers. Yeah. Right. So back to that. Old school writers will have shoeboxes typically, so they take their own pictures. Writers tend to take their own pictures, their own stuff. Artists tend to do that, right? Especially if it's so ephemeral, it's not going to last. So you'll take a picture. If you're lucky, you go back the next day and it's still there, maybe, depending on where it's done, But mostly you can go back and get a picture. But usually on the spot, they take a quick picture too. Anyways, they keep collections of all their pictures. When they go out on missions with their homies and, everyone's in front of the wall or like their party pictures, lifestyle pictures, all this stuff that comes out of it, memory, And so I'll ask them to grab a shoebox.
Yeah.
Their choice, whatever's the best one, whatever we're going to get the best out of, and or if it's historical, I'll say grab the oldest one if you can, and we'll sit back and we pop the shoebox, put it on the recorder, and we'll start going through photos.
Okay.
That's the easy way. The other way is say, hey, can you select 20 photos out of that? But for me, the elicitation is like on the spot. I like that on the spot stuff as you're talking, and it generates. Yeah. You get the most emotion. The most connection. It's most visceral when someone's like, "Oh yeah, man. Oh this, man. Okay, I gotta tell you." And they tell you that story, right? As opposed to like, "Well, this one I selected specifically." It's different levels of that, but you can have them select ahead.
Okay.
And then we go through the photos, and they have like a little story, whatever, or we just kind of go through the box. And it could take a few hours to do that. So you got to be prepared to have that kind of interview and then be able to transcribe that, depending whatever you get out of it.
Right.
Or sometimes have long silences where you're just kind of going through photos.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's, you got to, it's give and take a little bit, whatever.
Right.
But what I'll also do is I'll also take photos of their photos. Right? So I'll take either a straight photo of their photo or their box with the photos or them with the box, whatever it is. So some kind of, just kind of, I don't know, profile picture or something like that, whatever it is. But, and through it, like they'll pull out and we'll talk about when they did this spot on the tracks or this RIP mission for a buddy or a birthday mission or, I don't know, this trip out to wherever. And I think it's a fantastic device. I really.
Where do you see it going in terms of like digital? Because I'm sure people are not always going to have shoeboxes.
Well, they still do
with film. Yeah, people are like print out pictures.
Well, some of them still do that, but everyone has a shoebox now. You have folders on your Facebook account, and your Instagram is a shoebox. This is a digital shoebox, and
it feels like a little more fragile to me in terms of like, like what could happen to this digital archive. I mean, I guess things can get lost in a house fire or whatever.
And that happens more often than you think.
Yeah.
I don't know how many writers I've spoken to that have said they've lost photos as a result of typical insurance problems.
Really?
Floods, fires. Floods and fires are big, or theft is another one too. Believe it or not, like back in the day when printing photos cost money, you didn't have all the money to do it, and someone had a great photo of something you wanted, even if it was your buddy. Yeah. Sometimes they stole from each other too, right?
Right.
They weren't. It wasn't beyond them to. I mean, there's a code. Typically, you don't mess with. If they're a crewmate, they're your core homies, you don't mess with that type thing, Yeah. But if, like, say you're just over at someone else's place and you think that they're what they call a toy, or they think that you're not up to standard, or whatever it is. I don't care. Whatever it is. They got beef or whatever. Or maybe not beef, whatever. But that is, you just don't have, you don't figure, that individual doesn't figure so prominently with them, particularly, let's say. They'll steal. They would steal from instance. So photos would go missing, let's just say, right?
Right.
And that's not even unheard of outside of the graffiti community, that kind of stuff anyways, you know what I mean?
So that was Massive, and that is by Willem Burnaby, who is a student here at Concordia in the music program. And Willem and I collaborated on a little video I did for the Shirk Storytellers contest, which was selected as one of the top 25 finalists, which you can check out on the Best Concordia YouTube page. We've got a little playlist of videos going on there. So this week we are featuring music by Willem, and if you want to check out his stuff, you can go to his SoundCloud page, which is WillTunes778. That's WILLTUNES 778, and go and check out his music. He is super talented, and his stuff is awesome. So thanks, Willem. Now, last week I spoke with PhD students Marie-Ève Drouin Gagne and Sara Breitkreutz separately, and this week they are back for round 2 to talk about a research group that they're a part of here in the Ethnography Lab, centering around Cabot Square in Montreal. Now, this research group is working closely with the Montreal Urban Aboriginal Community Strategy Network to develop a collaborative project that engages the Cabot Square community and the Concordia University community using the photo voice research method. So Marie-Ève and Sara both joined me to fill me in on the details of this project. I am here with Marie-Ève Drouin and Sara Breitkreutz, and they are both members of the Cabot Square research group here in the ethnography lab, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
And I would like you to answer all of the questions at the same time, please, simultaneously. Thank you. No, just kidding. But so tell me a little bit about this Cabot Square group. Now, I know that, Sara, you were doing your master's work around sort of what was happening at Cabot Square. But so if people are just tuning in, where is Cabot Square? What's the deal with this place?
So Cabot Square is a public square. Park. Technically, I think it's a park, actually, that is not far from the Concordia downtown campus. So it's at the intersection of Atwater and St. Catherine. Okay. For people who know what that means, it's right at the Atwater metro station. And I had mentioned this before, but when I was doing my MA in anthropology, I kind of stumbled into doing some research in Cabot Square around the redevelopment of the square. It's a neighborhood, many neighborhoods in Montreal are rapidly gentrifying, but this particular neighborhood had some kind of old historic buildings. There was something called the Seville Theater that had been there for years, but it was derelict. And in 2011 or 2012, it had just been torn down, and there was a condo project going up. So there was, so I got involved, long story short, I got involved kind of through this interest in gentrification, in critiquing gentrification, and then found out when I got there that it was also an important gathering place for Indigenous people in Montreal, and especially Inuit. So that was my MA research, and through that, I developed some contacts with some of the organizations that do work. Actually, during the course of my research, a new group emerged as part of the Urban Aboriginal Community Strategy Network, called the Cabot Square Project. Not to be confused with us as the Cabot Square Project. We are
different from Cabot Square Project.
Yeah, we should think of that nomenclature. But anyway, and so they were kind of like a municipal partnership with the Urban Aboriginal Strategy Network to make sure, like to kind of, as a way of kind of registering a lot of the critique and dissent that was coming from the community, the fear that the renovations would basically just evict the people who were spending a lot of time there.
Right.
Because they were often people who were experiencing sort of housing precarity and were in a vulnerable position. And so, not always, but sometimes. And so there was definitely a sense that, like, the city's just trying to kick people out. And so the Cabot Square Project arose to try to kind of mitigate that and find solutions that work. And in the end, the spatial redesign happened as planned, but they were able to get a full-time outreach worker posted to Cabot Square, which is great. There's now an Aboriginal-run cafe in Cabot Square, and also there's been for the last couple of summers there have been a series of cultural programming events centered on Indigenous culture in the city, and so things like soapstone carving workshops, concerts, storytelling circles, things like that have been happening in the square. And so that's kind of that's all come out of the Cabot Square
in the
project.
Square.
In the square, yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's important that it's in the space.
In the space, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. And so then this project, how did this come about?
So, I was telling you before about that first meeting of the Ethno Lab, where Sara was there, I was there. There were a couple of other people that day. I think Bonnie was there.
Bonnie and
Marion was there, who are also part of this group.
Okay, how many people are part of the group?
We're officially 7.
Okay.
It's a little fluid.
It's a little bit fluid, and I've been like recruiting a lot of things, but anyway. But we began, like, at first we were us 4 that were at that first meeting. And as I was saying, I think our interests were all about, like, thinking about Montreal as an Indigenous place and space. And I think we came along with that. I think also Sara wanted to do a project, continue kind of with all the contacts that, correct me if I'm wrong, but like all the contacts that she made throughout her MA, and kind of continuing that project and that relationship that is already in place. And so I think the two interests of, like, thinking about Montreal as an Indigenous place and having, like, Cabot Square as a kind of an anchor for that kind of came together, and we began developing a project of like how. But that took kind of a long time, because at first we really had that idea of like mapping Indigenous places in Montreal and the names of it, and like in relationship with different Indigenous organizations in Montreal, and so we had like different avenues that we kind of explored. But I guess your implication with Cabot Square kind of always kind of anchored that back to Cabot Square in some way,
right?
And then Rachel, I don't know if you want to talk about that part.
Sure, yeah.
What she asked us,
Yeah.
or what she kind of, how that came together.
Yeah, well, so I think, so what Maya was saying about our kind of the little group of us that have come together have like broad interests in sort of ways that research can be used to decolonize, or to kind of decolonize the relationship between university research and communities, and also thinking about Montreal as an Indigenous space. And so that's something hopefully we can move on to in the future as the Ethnolab keeps going. But this initial project, the way that in that first meeting with the Ethnolab, the way that it kind of came across to me anyway is that the idea of the Ethnolab was to create the space where we could come up with sort of relatively short-term ethnographic projects that were anchored somehow in a community partnership or an industry partnership or something like that. And that's what made me think of Cabot Square, just because I know, so Rachel Deutsch was until very recently the coordinator of the Cabot Square project. The Cabot Square project technically has kind of been folded back into other stuff that the Urban Aboriginal Strategy Network is doing, so she still works for them. But so because we wanted to do something that was kind of a community-based project, we had lots of meetings where we had lots of ideas about things that we could do in Montreal, and it was very productive and very exciting. But then we ultimately had to go back to Rachel and say, like, okay, so what would you like us to actually... Like, we reached out to her and said, look, there's this group of us. Is there anything you need from a group of students who have training in ethnographic methods? And she was very enthusiastic, and she said, yeah, we could do something in the square in the summer. Then we had all these brainstorming sessions, and then we finally had to come back to her and say, like, this is what we could do, but what would you like us to do? And so that was a process of negotiating, which I think that's a really valuable thing for me anyway that has come out of being part of the Ethnolab, is like getting that extra experience doing these collaborative projects and just seeing how that process works and how the timelines work out or don't work out. We've been working on the ethics protocol on the academic side for a long time. Community projects often move at a different pace than academic projects. So,
have you submitted ethics? Has that been like an ongoing thing?
Yeah, and we received now the answers with like, we need to do some change. But the funny thing is that in between the time that we submitted the ethics, and so we had a meeting also with the community partners, and that really changed. You know, we had to rethink our project, and then we came out with a different project. Now, well, it's kind of the same, but so just also to clarify, what are we doing? And like, we haven't really said that.
Just about to ask you that.
So what are we doing? So the idea generally was the idea of doing a photo voice project in the square.
Yes.
So photo voice being a method of kind of visual research methods, but it's also community-based in the sense that you give the camera to the people for themselves to take pictures, and then they narrate, instead of like me doing an analysis of it. They themselves kind of narrate the picture based on the subject that we're talking about. Let's say, how is Montreal an Indigenous space, let's say. Well, then they would like take pictures representing that, and then narrate why they took that picture and all that. And then the end product that we were looking at was going to be posters with these images and a couple of captions, like important captions of what that represents, and then having an exposition in the square about that.
Oh, cool.
So that's kind of the overall idea, but we had to craft it in ways that would work. So now the way that we decided to work this out, and in a way that would be also more incorporated in Concordia, is that we wanted to give a photo voice workshop to Indigenous students at Concordia, and maybe even with some students at Dawson and other places, and have them kind of do some drop-in sessions with users of the square during these Friday
cultural events
in the square during the summer.
Okay.
So people will be able to jump in and be like, okay, so and the students will take like the pictures with them, so that they're gonna have the because there was also a whole issue about like how do you give the camera and who. Anyway,
right.
So they're gonna run around with the cameras and kind of take the picture that the people want them to take. Maybe they can be in the picture. We're gonna give back like a copy of that picture to the participants. And they're going to have conversation about these pictures, and so anyway.
Okay,
but
so the students kind of operate as research assistants in a sense, and then
they're co-researchers. They're not assistants.
Okay, okay, cool, awesome.
But the idea is also that we're going to offer them also a training in photo voice, so that might be something that they're interested in, and then they can use that for their own research if they want to. And so there's like different layers that we're going for. We're still into we reached out to the Indigenous Student Council. I'm having a blank right now in the actual name of it, but Concordia. We haven't yet have an answer, but we're in those processes also of reaching out to them and seeing if there's also is the project okay, or do they would they some
is
feedback or anything, and also are they interested in being part of that? And so we have kind of different. Also partners, I guess. So it makes the thing a little bit complex, but also really exciting.
Yeah. That's we're kind of in that stage now where we're trying to suss out interest and find out if there are students who would like to participate. I don't know. We can maybe give you some contact information if anyone's listening to this podcast.
Maybe they can reach out to the ethnography lab. And
maybe it won't be. I don't know if it'll be the right time, but.
And so then this is kind of continuing that vein of community participatory research that you're interested in, hey, because it kind of it puts that into you. They're going to be your co-researchers, right? So there's that element, and then people in the community also get to take ownership and participate in the research in a way that's maybe hopefully impactful for them too, right?
Yeah, hopefully, yeah.
Do you guys have experience with photo voice? Have you done?
So our expert in our group is Ashley.
Okay.
She's a student at McGill, and she's in the Participatory Cultures Lab at McGill.
With Claudia Mitchell.
Yeah, and they really have a certain expertise in terms of photo voice. So I've been working with Ashley. I've visited their lab, and she kind of... she didn't train me, but we went through the process and talked about it. I've read a little bit about that, and then we, as a group, had a conversation about these things. But our expert, if that's it's Ashley.
She's taking the lead on that.
So I mean, when we're gonna frame, the workshop and everything, she's probably gonna be the one who's gonna offer a lot.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not reading about it and everything. It's a participatory action research.
Right.
It's not far from that, but it's a community-based participatory research too. And there's different texts also of how to frame it, because actually it can take so many forms too, depending on the project. And there are some people who have worked to adapt it in Indigenous communities, and so there's all of these different elements going on. But to me, it's also what's really exciting as part of the ethnolab, to learn also, because that's not a method that I used in in any of my research projects.
Yeah.
So that's a new thing to learn, and so that's also exciting, and trying a new thing. And I think that's why also the ethnolab is a place to. It's making space for trying new things and doing different things that we're not necessarily doing in our research project. But who knows? Maybe based on that, my postdoc will be a photo voice. But I don't know. I'm saying whatever, but you know what I mean? We don't know where that could lead,
Absolutely. Yeah, that is a really cool part of the lab is this sort of spirit of experimentation and getting to try things. I think that's really an exciting part of the work that's going on here. So do you guys have a question that you're going to ask people when they set out to do this project, or you thought about that?
Yeah, well, the community partner, what they articulated to us that they were interested in having in Cabot Square was actually something that would speak to the 375th anniversary of Montreal celebrations that are happening this summer.
Right.
But from as a sort of a counter narrative to talk about Indigenous histories of Montreal and of Cabot Square. specifically because that space itself has a long history, obviously, of different uses, and kind of uncovering some of the untold narratives about the square is something that Rachel Deutsch was really interested in. And so, excuse me, that was kind of our starting point. And as we said, something that we're sort of more generally interested in is how Montreal can be understood as an Indigenous place, because it's very clear how it can be understood as a settler space. That's what we're all kind of accustomed to. But trying to understand that there are other ways of interpreting the space and providing space for those narratives to come out.
Yeah.
So, and how photo voice works is it tends to coalesce around a prompt or a question or some kind of a theme. And so that's basically the theme. Montreal is an Indigenous place. Cool. And then people can kind of take that and run with it.
There's like maybe two things so one part also is that we're going to do research and have some kind of kiosk in the square about like the history of the square. That was something that kind of Rachel and, they were interested in us doing. And Trisha, who's also part of our group, so there's another member. She's in journalism here at or communication. Oh, I have a blank. Communication, maybe?
She was in communications and now she's in...
Anyway, she's doing her PhD here at Concordia, and
sorry, Trisha.
Sorry for misrepresenting Trisha here. But she's been doing some research also about infrastructures in Montreal, and some of it is also looking at the history and the Indigenous infrastructures, and also she's worked a lot on lacrosse games in Montreal, and so she's doing a little bit of research on the square, and I think we're going to jump on that too and like develop a little bit more to have that kind of kiosk so that people can also be informed.
Right.
And the other part is also that photo voice as a participatory research methods also imply that we have an idea of thinking about Montreal as an Indigenous place and space. That's kind of our prompt. But when we do the training with the students and when we meet with people in the square, that's also up to them to like define, how they want to approach the thing.
Right.
And if that's exactly the question they want to, answer, or maybe they want to take it a bit differently. So there needs to be some kind of flexibility there where, it's up to them to kind of take it and run with it, right?
Yeah, so. That's the whole idea behind sort of participant-guided inquiry.
Right.
Like we sort of have to come to it with some kind of theme in mind, but we're, open to seeing where it goes.
Right. It's sort of a collaborative kind of process. Very cool. Well, you guys will have to come back and talk more about it during the summer when you guys have got everything up and running. But thank you so much for coming to talk to us.
Thank you.
Sounds like a really cool project.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for doing all the work for this awesome podcast.
Yeah, well, it's our pleasure. Right, guys? Yeah. All right, so we will talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
All right, thanks, Sara and Marie-Ève. Now, up next, we have a brand new segment here on Best Concordia, something we are calling the off-the-record segment. It's kind of like a little bonus clip, because as we sit here in the ethnography lab, our sound recorder, Kris Millett, surreptitiously records us and sneakily captures all of the conversations that we're having before we actually get started with the interviews. So we've been able to listen to what Kris is recording, and we're kind of getting Kris's perspective as he sits there with the headphones on, looking off into the distance. We've silently judging. Now we know what he is judging. And we often don't know that he's recording. So, we just have to live with what we say. And so we thought, why not broadcast that to the world? Because we just are masochists and we live to embarrass ourselves. So here, without further delay, is Anne-Marie and I talking about our thoughts on comedy.
He influenced positively a generation of comedians because he worked in the U.S. He's a real stand-up. He really respects the art of comedy and respects the stage.
Right, because you're saying he's like a big champion of new comedians too, right? Like he
has a podcast, like the best podcast, and he has been influencing. Like he's been telling everybody to start podcasts, and they've started like maybe 5 or 6 comedians have started podcasts
cool.
since you've told them to start them.
What do they talk about on their podcast? Though, do they talk about comedy?
Yeah, it's kind of backstage comedy. One talks about sports.
Okay.
One is backstage comedy, but they're not like all equal. I mean, they're not all very good, but I would say 2 are very, very good.
Yeah. Well, podcasting is the way of the future.
So there's that I appreciate. I don't think he's that funny. I don't think he's that funny.
You don't think Mike Ward's that funny?
No, I love his podcast, and I love the influence he has, and I love the way that he showcases young, upcoming comedians.
Right, yeah.
That's what I appreciate.
I like that, too.
He really pushes them to push on old comedian.
Right.
What I appreciate is that he respects comedy, and he's a good educator.
Yeah, like the fact that he's like mentoring people and cares about nurturing upcoming talent. Like I'm like, well, you can't be a total like evil bastard if you're like that. You know?
I think his humor is really trashy, but he respects comedians that are super trashy. So he'll be the like Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle is like one of the best American comedians right now, and he's.
Oh yeah, he got in trouble recently.
Really?
He's making like jokes about trans people in his show, and it was like again a case of like punching down. Like it was not like at least the critique I read of it was saying that.
But even he was never.
I never heard
anywhere close to being a feminist or being an open-minded. He's like super conservative,
right?
But not overly. But
yeah. I think people put a lot of like expectation on him because they have this idea of him of like, you know, like he walked away from his show after 3 seasons. And he went to Africa and like
he's not an activist or he's not.
But people kind of put that
philosopher.
On him.
He's a comedian. Yeah.
Yes, but then you have these expectations of him.
Can't you be just do your job and do it really, really well?
Yeah.
Because he's an amazing comedian.
Yeah,
Is he making you think? Well, yeah, he did. Victoria.
Yeah. It's social commentary from him, I think.
But about race.
Yes.
So you can't have everything.
Well, it's called intersectionality, Anne-Marie. Well, you guys, that is another episode of Best Concordia. And, I think this one was the best yet. So thank you so much for tuning in and listening. This one has been super fun. I am your hostess with the mostest, Johnny B. With me, as always, Anne-Marie Turcotte and Kris Millett. We just want to say thank you to our guests from this week, Kris Murray, Sara Breitkreutz, Drouin, Gagne, and music by the fabulous Willem Burnaby. If you want more information about any of the things we've been talking about on the podcast, you can go to the Ethnography Lab website. We have got a spot for Best Concordia and a link section. So we are linking to all of the things that you are hearing about on these episodes. So please go and check that out. Don't forget to follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. And a special thank you to the Ethnography Lab and the Speculative Life Research Cluster for hosting us this week. We will see you next time. Bye. Yeah, and voice class, it's all about breathing, connecting with your breath, not vocal frying. Oh my god, I'm so tired.